Hello and welcome back or welcome to the channel. I'm Loudguns, and after a couple of weeks of R&R, I'm throwing myself back into a bit of CitCon coverage. We had a great night on Saturday watching the event at a cinema, and while I'm sure bits and pieces are going to filter into other videos, I wanted to really just focus in on the one bit that excited me the most as the leader of a sizable orc, and that's tactical strike groups. So if this sounds good to you, then grab a cup of tea while I roll the intro, then let's get into it. While there were other highlights of CitCon and a few concerning bits, mostly researching the cost of the GPU I'm going to need to make the most of the new Genesis planet tech, the standout for me was very definitely tactical strike groups. Firstly, the initial mission where you're tasked by the People's Alliance with assaulting a fortified asteroid base controlled by the new Mystery faction looks fantastic, and to me gives Star Citizen the high level of raid content that I personally crave. But secondly, I think what it potentially opens the door to in the future, with large-scale instanced raids of various types, is incredibly exciting, particularly for those of us who want to play the game primarily with our organisations. In this video we're going to start with a brief recap of the mission and its various stages, then we'll move on to a little bit of theory crafting, thinking about the sort of fleet that you might need to take on this challenge, and finally I want to talk about the types of future raids I'd love to see in the future. The initial raid is set to be a multi-stage operation, requiring a varied and balanced fleet. In this first stage, you'll be tasked with relieving a People's Alliance Idris from attack by hostiles. Expect waves of bad guys that you can engage with your own fighter squadrons to push them off. You'll then move on to the giant asteroid base itself. However, you'll be dealing with a level of base defences that we haven't seen up until this point. The Mystery faction have repurposed Vandal anti-cap ship guns into turrets, and these will prioritise targeting larger vessels, ignoring fighters, and output significant damage that could even put an Idris at risk, preventing you from moving in to assault with large ships. Special shielding makes them invulnerable to direct attack, so first you'll need to seek and destroy external power relays. The shields on these relays though are resistant to energy-based attacks, so you're going to need ballistics or perhaps ideally torpedo bombers. When the power relays are knocked out, the station opens up and it's time for a trench run. Agile fighters will be needed to make strafing runs to take out cooling units along the trench inside the superstructure, which has 3 entrances allowing you to go in and out. The shield generator that you're targeting is emitting heavy amounts of distortion damage, so you're going to be time limited in terms of how long you can spend inside the zone, forcing you to make quicker passes. Once the cooling units are down, that forces the core to overheat, allowing you to directly attack it, or, use the force to hit it through exhaust ports with missiles and torps. With the anti-cap weapons down, you can move your heavier ships into the fight, particularly useful with the planned implementation of hangar rearming and repairing on carrier ships, allowing you to resupply the smaller ships in your fleet. At the same time, you can send in your dropships with marines on board to rescue the hostages. Expect an intense gunfight, get the hostage to a hangar and open the doors and they'll fly off, with your air support outside ensuring that they can make a clean getaway. Of course there's nothing like gate crashes, and seeing that the space station's defences are offline, the Vandal will be quick to assemble a raiding party to take full advantage, and you're going to be caught in the crossfire between these two opposing factions in the final stage. In the glimpses we saw, we can definitely expect heavy waves of Vandal fighters, and something just a little bigger. I'm no Vandal capship expert here, so feel free to let me know down in the comments if you are. But definitely we can be comfortable that there's going to be something big enough for our Idrises to shoot at in this final stage. So this to me looks absolutely fantastic, so I hope you'll forgive and maybe even encourage a little detour into theory crafting land. After all, what's CitCon without a little blue sky thinking? We started this chat a little bit in the pub after the show, but I've sat down and cooked up my ideal fleet for taking this challenge on with our Org FRCN. Our doors are open to new members, and we like to give folks a taste of multiplayer action, so even if you're not looking to join an org right now, still do swing by the Discord using the link in the video description down below. And a special shout out as ever to Starjump for their fantastic fleet viewer tool that I'm using here. Love to use this to plan out fleets for org ops. It's also great for just looking at your pretty JPEGs, so do check that out, the link's also in the video description. First up, we've got our heavy capital core. And obviously the mainstay here is going to be our 3 Idrises. I would go for a combination of weaponry here, with 2 Idris M slug throwers great for dealing out hefty amounts of DPS, and the P's beam weapon great at stripping down shields, particularly against enemy capitals. I'm also tempted to throw at least 1 Polaris in the mix. Not only do you get the benefits of its torpedo payload, we've also found the slightly smaller cap to be great for precision targeting of specific weapons on enemy caps. I think it's a fairly safe bet at this point that RSI's Perseus is going to make it in before the Tactical Strike Group missions, so I would include a trio of these in our main fleet, hopefully giving us slightly more agile gunboats to help deal with medium and large craft at decent range, as well as coordinating with that Polaris to sub-target against the enemy capitals. And finally we're going to add a Hammerhead. Now this is a ship that doesn't get a lot of love in SC currently. However, I think there's potentially a place for it in helping to deal with fighters and bombers that get too close to our own capitals. Particularly in the final phase, you want to make sure that your caps are free to engage the larger Vandal ships and capitals, not worry about what's buzzing around them. And having some dedicated anti-flak that sticks close in formation with your own fleet will help with that without having to worry about your own fighters being close all of the time. Bringing up the rear of the fleet are our Valkyrie dropships, ready for when we hit the assault phase. I would actually keep one of our Idrises back in the formation and hold our marine squads on board that. They can then quickly board a Valk when it's time to go, rather than risk getting fish in a barrel during the earlier stages. And having a few Valkyries to choose from just bakes in some contingency in case one takes excessive damage or is destroyed. And I'd even go a step further and squeeze a Pisces into each of the Idris' MPUV bays, just to act as an emergency dropship if the worst happened and we lost all the Valks. In a pinch, these nippy little ships can always act as an FPS clown car. Of course we need some fighters to get that far though, so thankfully the Idrises also provide plenty of room. I've gone with fighter squadrons consisting of 4 Gladiuses and 2 F7As on board 2 of the Idrises, and a bomber squadron of 3 Eclipses on the 3rd. Based on our past experiments, it's more than possible to squeeze in a bit more. However, I would also be keen to save some room for weapon loadout changes mid-fight. The ability to reload and repair coming to the Idris hangars is massive, and it's something that Ben and I were talking about in our most recent podcast. But something we've tested successfully in the org is switching from ballistic to energy weaponry in the hangars using deck crews. This way the fighters could have the required ballistics for dealing with the initial stages to cut the power to the anti-capital ship weaponry, but then be switched over to more optimal laser loadouts for the latter stage fleet battles. So all in all, we'd be looking at around 70 people to crew this and take on the challenge, which sounds like perfect large-scale raiding parties to me. But please do let me know down in the comments what you think and what you change. I do always have a soft spot for these kinds of chats. But while the Tactical Strike Group missions look amazing, I think it's the overall type of content that it might herald that really excites me. For a while now, since the release of the Enter the Storm Valakar event, I've been very much of the opinion that Star Citizen needs instancing to really work. It's not that I detest PvP or the open world setting in general. I love a bit of argy-bargy with other players, and I think open world contestable objectives are great. They're the logical place for super high risk, high reward aspects of the game. I do also love PvE content, and I think there's something extremely cool about getting together with your mates to go raiding. Ultimately, this only works if it can be a more easily curated environment. This allows you to put together your fleets and comps to address the challenge, not also have a backup fleet in PvP meta for when someone tries to third party you right before the end. I think this type of mission opens up way more possibilities for combined arms gameplay, potentially including locations that restrict the use of ships and focus more on ground combat and vehicles, allowing us to experience things like base assaults and defences. Seriously, I just really want an actual reason to roll out with a formation of Nova tanks. It's also worth noting that this type of instancing doesn't have to be restricted to purely PvE, A number of other MMOs utilise instancing for more balanced, fair and engaging PvP fights, so I hope we can see some of that too. So I think we'll leave it there for today. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Overall, I felt this year's CitCon from a pure content view was a little hit and miss. After last year's amazing 1.0 reveal and being there in person, I think it was always going to be incredibly hard to top. And while I understand the reasoning behind it, with Squadron 42 very much in focus for the devs, I do think the shortened format maybe left things a little lighter in detail than we've got used to over the years. However, there was still some gold in there, and I was particularly happy to get to spend another year with my friends from Frontier. Regardless of the ups and downs of the show itself, you can always have a Stargarita with your mates and a good laugh. So with all that said, thanks for watching to the end, and I'll see you next time.